been talking to him for months. Now, wait a second. They'd only been talking to me for weeks. So they probably would have gone ahead without me.
Harrison Ford growled at 82 before revealing the 6 actors he hated the most in his entire career. Known for his gruff charm and no-nonsense attitude, Ford didn't hold back, calling one co-star a total diva and another the most arrogant man he'd ever met. After decades of silence, the Indiana Jones icon has finally let loose, and Hollywood may never look the same. Sean Young. Of all the interpersonal conflicts in Harrison Ford's storied career, none were as psychologically layered or enduringly disruptive as the one that unfolded between him and Sean Young during the filming of Blade Runner in 1982. What began as standard professional tension quickly spiraled into a haunting case study in the volatile mix of method acting, personal boundaries, and incompatible artistic temperaments. Their relationship would leave a permanent mark not only on the tone of Blade Runner itself but also on Ford's subsequent views on how far an actor should go in pursuit of emotional truth. The conflict originated in rehearsals long before cameras rolled. Young, in her early 20s at the time, approached her role as Rachel, the enigmatic replicant, with a fierce commitment to character immersion. Influenced by method techniques, she chose to embody Rachel both on and off set, blurring the line between the woman she played and the woman she was. Ford, by contrast, had always maintained a pragmatic, grounded approach to acting, treating it as a craft rather than emotional excavation. For Ford, the job required clarity, clear direction, defined boundaries, and separation between role and real life. That separation began to dissolve the moment Young, still in character, brought Rachel's icy detachment and guarded mystery into her off-screen interactions with him. Director Ridley Scott later reflected on the growing chasm between the two leads, saying, "Sean lived in character continuously, which meant Harrison was never quite sure if he was talking to the actress or the replicant." Ford, whose working style thrived on human connection and trust, reportedly found this method intensely disorienting. What unsettled him wasn't just the performance, it was the environment it created. The professional space between them had become infected with ambiguity and tension, making every exchange fraught with confusion and weariness. Ford began to feel as if he were acting in a psychological experiment rather than a film. As production progressed, their fragile dynamic deteriorated further. The romantic scenes between Rick Deckard and Rachel, central to the film's emotional arc, were especially problematic. These sequences, intended to communicate vulnerability and intimacy, instead became painful to shoot. According to cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth, it was the most awkward professional chemistry I've ever witnessed. There was no flow. Every moment was like pulling teeth. Ford's discomfort was palpable both on camera and off. He later admitted that performing those scenes with Young felt like navigating a psychological minefield, a telling metaphor for the treacherous emotional terrain he associated with her process. Some accounts suggest the conflict wasn't merely artistic, it bordered on personal distress. Young's full-time embodiment of Rachel meant that even casual hallway run-ins or lunch breaks carried the stilted, hypnotic energy of a scene. Ford, who was dealing with the immense technical and philosophical demands of the film, had little patience for what he viewed as performative excess. The divide became so profound that it affected the mood on set. Crew members picked sides. Ridley Scott, while supportive of both actors, admitted the atmosphere could be icy, even combative. Though the two never had a physical altercation or public blow-up, the psychological weight of their incompatibility haunted the remainder of the shoot. Ford became noticeably more withdrawn and was often curt with Young. By the end of production, their working relationship was essentially non-functional. While Blade Runner would go on to achieve cult status, neither actor spoke warmly of the experience in its immediate aftermath. In later interviews, Ford was uncharacteristically candid, confessing that the experience with Sean Young profoundly reshaped how he approached co-stars, particularly those who embraced immersive techniques. "You want to believe in the story," he once said, "but you also want to know the people you're acting with understand the difference between fiction and real life." For Young, the experience was similarly formative, though in a different direction. Her performance was widely praised, but the rumors of difficult behavior followed her for years, sometimes unfairly becoming a shorthand for the challenges she faced as a young actress in a male-dominated industry. Still, the Blade Runner chapter between her and Ford remains one of the most enigmatic clashes in modern Hollywood history, a quiet, unresolved tension that turned a science fiction masterpiece into a deeply personal battleground. Julia Roberts. In the golden age of 90s Hollywood, the idea of pairing Harrison Ford and Julia Roberts in a sweeping romantic drama seemed like a studio executive's dream. He was the gruff, quietly intense leading man known for emotional restraint and understated heroism. She was America's sweetheart, vivacious, luminous, and unapologetically expressive. Together, their names practically guaranteed box office gold. But what unfolded behind the scenes of their ill-fated, never-completed romantic drama shocked even the most jaded industry insiders. Instead of cinematic sparks, there was silence, tension, and a spectacular clash of incompatible energies that brought the entire production to a grinding halt. The tension between Ford and Roberts didn't erupt in the form of tabloid feuds or explosive arguments. It was quieter, more insidious, rooted in opposing philosophies of acting, personal style, and how star power should translate on screen. Ford approached the project with the same meticulous subtlety that had defined his best work. His preparation was internal. He focused on nuance, emotional restraint, and the belief that romantic connection could be conveyed in the smallest of gestures. For Ford, less was always more. Roberts, by contrast, brought the warmth and exuberance that had made her a global icon. Her process was outward, emotionally charged, and highly responsive. She thrived on expressive connection, heightened rhythms, and moments that demanded emotional availability and vibrant reaction. Where Ford found power in quiet, she found energy in exposure. On paper, the pairing could have balanced beautifully. In practice, it was like trying to play a duet in two entirely different keys. Director Mike Nichols, brought in to shepherd the project through its early phases, was the first to grasp the scope of the problem. Julia's charm operates at a frequency that requires acknowledgement and response, he later recalled. Harrison's appeal comes from what he doesn't show, what he holds back. They were like two different instruments trying to play the same song in different keys. The project began to unravel during chemistry reads. Early rehearsals quickly revealed what would become an insurmountable issue: their performances simply did not speak to each other. Ford's instinct was to underplay moments of emotional escalation, leaning into realism and emotional repression, while Roberts instinctively rose to meet those same moments with theatrical openness and wide-eyed intensity. As a result, key scenes felt lopsided and hollow. There was no emotional reciprocity, only dissonance. Script rewrites were ordered, rehearsals were extended, but the results were always the same. Scenes that read as passionate on the page played flat on film. Roberts's lively, expressive style seemed to bounce off Ford's tightly controlled emotional palette without finding purchase. Meanwhile, Ford, already a reserved presence off-camera, grew increasingly remote in response to Roberts's energetic performance style, retreating into the very stillness that made her feel emotionally abandoned in scenes that were meant to convey intimacy. The breaking point came during what was intended to be the film's emotional centerpiece, a slow-burning, rain-drenched confession of love between their two characters. The scene was designed to build from subtle tension to a breakthrough of vulnerability and connection, but instead it dissolved into what cinematographer Sven Nykvist described as the absence of chemistry so profound it became almost fascinating to watch. Roberts delivered her monologue with raw, open emotion, tears, inflection, body language, and waited for Ford's character to meet her halfway. But his muted response, though true to character, felt distant and detached. The emotional bridge never formed. Crew members later described the moment as painfully awkward, a mirror of what had been playing out for weeks behind the camera. Roberts reportedly left the set that day in tears, telling Nichols, "I feel like I'm acting into a void." Ford, in turn, confided to a producer that he felt like he was acting opposite a performance rather than a person, a rare and telling comment from an actor known for his restraint both on and off screen. Mel Gibson. Of all the professional conflicts in Harrison Ford's long and disciplined Hollywood career, none cut deeper or proved more consequential than his quiet but firm refusal to collaborate with Mel Gibson. What might have become a powerful pairing between two of cinema's most bankable stars in a high-stakes action thriller instead became a study in moral boundaries, professionalism, and the growing cultural expectation that character behind the camera matters just as much as performance in front of it. The friction between Ford and Gibson was not the product of a single moment or a dramatic blow-up on set. Instead, it unfolded over a series of development meetings and potential collaborations throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, during which time Gibson's off-screen controversies began to eclipse his on-screen achievements. While Ford maintained a reputation for privacy and professionalism, Gibson had become increasingly known for erratic behavior, polarizing public comments, and troubling allegations that clashed with Ford's sense of workplace integrity. What made the breakdown especially significant was how the two men embodied completely different ideas about artistic collaboration. Ford, known for his stoic discipline and quiet dedication, built his career on mutual respect and emotional restraint. He brought intensity to his performances, yes, but never at the expense of harmony on set. Gibson, by contrast, had cultivated a reputation for volatility, both in his creative choices and in his public persona. While some saw this as fearless artistry, others, including Ford, saw it as a growing liability. The clash came to a head during the pre-production phase of an untitled action thriller developed by producer Jerry Bruckheimer. The project, a gritty international espionage story, was being positioned as a major tentpole film for both actors. At first, the pairing looked commercially irresistible: Ford, the ever-reliable statesman of American cinema, and Gibson, the firebrand with box office clout. But from the first table reads, Ford sensed an undercurrent he couldn't ignore. According to Bruckheimer, Harrison operates from a baseline of mutual respect and professional dignity. Mel's personal controversies created an environment where that baseline became impossible to maintain. They weren't just making different movies, they were operating from different moral universes. As Gibson's public reputation continued to deteriorate, spurred by incendiary remarks, erratic interviews, and troubling reports from past collaborators, Ford's discomfort deepened. He began to question whether Gibson's presence on the project was jeopardizing not just the film's cohesion but its soul. That discomfort intensified when several actors under consideration for supporting roles declined to proceed, citing concerns about working alongside Gibson. For Ford, whose belief in teamwork and mutual accountability defined his approach to filmmaking, this was an unacceptable breach. The breaking point came during a closed-door meeting with studio executives. Ford, in what insiders describe as one of the most principled and rare moments of Hollywood dissent, expressed clear and unwavering concerns. He reportedly said he could not, in good conscience, work with someone whose personal behavior created an unsafe or uncomfortable environment for others. His decision wasn't rooted in personal animosity or politics, it was about respect, ethics, and the collective trust required to create meaningful art. He didn't raise his voice, one executive recalled. But it was the most forceful thing I've ever seen him do. He wasn't talking about a disagreement over dialogue or camera angles. He was drawing a moral line. The project unraveled shortly afterward. While officially shelved due to creative delays, the truth was widely understood in industry circles: Ford had walked away. And in doing so, he had made one of the most quietly courageous statements of his career. In an era when many stars avoided controversy by staying silent, Ford's stance resonated. His actions underscored a shifting paradigm in Hollywood, one in which talent was no longer enough if it came at the cost of respect, decency, and emotional safety on set. Gibson would continue to navigate his own redemption arc in the years to come, but the fallout from his near collaboration with Ford remains a symbolic turning point. For Ford, it was a moment of clarity where craft and commerce diverged, and he chose craft. He chose character. He chose to uphold a standard that for him was non-negotiable. It wasn't just a missed movie, it was a message. And in that message, Ford reminded Hollywood and everyone in it that professionalism isn't just about showing up to work, it's about how you treat the people you work with. Tommy Lee Jones. The tension between Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones on the set of The Fugitive is now seen as one of the most fascinating studies of creative friction in modern Hollywood, a tale of two legendary actors whose mutual respect was ultimately overshadowed by their incompatible working methods. What happened during the film's production was not simply a clash of egos, but a slow-burning collision of two profoundly different philosophies on acting, both of which shaped the electric dynamic audiences felt on screen and the strained atmosphere behind the camera. Ford came into the film as the steady hand, the consummate professional with a meticulous, almost architectural approach to character development. He treated his role as Dr. Richard Kimball with the kind of structured intensity that had made him a box office giant, mapping emotional beats across the script, timing gestures and expressions to narrative arcs, and anchoring himself in a consistent, measured performance that would evolve logically from scene to scene. Every look, every pause, every choice had been rehearsed and refined to maintain the integrity of Kimball's harrowing journey. Jones, in contrast, approached his role as U.S. Marshal Sam Gerard like a jazz soloist, improvisational, alive in the moment, and resistant to predictability. He relished the freedom to try new things with each take, often throwing in spontaneous gestures, line inflections, or subtle shifts in tone that would reorient the rhythm of a scene entirely. For him, acting wasn't about building a predictable arc, it was about finding truth in unpredictability moment to moment. Director Andrew Davis would later compare Jones's process to freeform jazz, noting that Tommy changed the color of a scene every time we rolled. It was exciting, but also dangerous, especially for someone like Harrison, who needed continuity to track his character. The earliest signs of friction emerged during their first major shared scene, where Gerard interrogates a wounded Kimball. Jones altered the pacing and delivery of his lines take after take, forcing Ford to constantly recalibrate his performance mid-scene. Ford, who had built Kimball's reactions on specific timing cues, found himself unsettled and increasingly frustrated. He couldn't find the emotional footholds he'd prepared. What began as professional confusion soon hardened into deeper tension. The situation escalated further when Jones began to modify scripted dialogue, changing emphases or even word choices in subtle but significant ways that affected Ford's carefully laid timing. Ford, known for his deep respect for script integrity and collaborative rhythm, grew vocal about the disruptions. Heated discussions followed. On more than one occasion, crew members noted that production halted due to disputes over what constituted professional courtesy and whether spontaneity justified the dismantling of a co-star's performance structure. Director Andrew Davis was caught in the middle of this creative duel. "I had two brilliant actors making two different movies," he reflected years later. "The tension between them was real, but that's what made their scenes pop. You didn't know what was going to happen, and neither did they." The breaking point came during the iconic tunnel confrontation sequence, the moment where Kimball shouts, "I didn't kill my wife," and Gerard coldly replies, "I don't care." What looked effortless on screen was in reality a grueling, emotional standoff behind the scenes. Jones's mercurial energy turned the atmosphere chaotic, improvising gestures and tonal shifts that left Ford scrambling to preserve the emotional logic of his performance. At one point, Ford reportedly walked off set briefly, demanding clarity on blocking and delivery after Jones had once again altered the scene's rhythm without warning. Despite the strain, the creative combustion produced something extraordinary. The on-screen dynamic between Ford's tightly wound Kimball and Jones's brash, instinctive Gerard crackled with genuine tension. Their mutual disdain, thinly veiled beneath layers of character interaction, gave The Fugitive its most memorable edge. Yet, the personal cost was considerable. While both men remained publicly respectful in interviews, insiders confirmed that the experience left emotional scars. Ford, always a craftsman at heart, reportedly considered the film one of his most psychologically taxing roles, not because of the physical demands, but because of the mental exhaustion of working alongside an actor who seemed to reject the very idea of stability. Jones, for his part, never expressed regret but acknowledged that the role pushed him into some of the most intense acting territory of his career. Shia LaBeouf. The perhaps most volatile entry in Hollywood's long history of generational clashes came in the form of Shia LaBeouf's stormy collaboration with Harrison Ford during the production of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Though on paper it was a symbolic passing of the torch, Ford's aging icon sharing the screen with LaBeouf, the erratic face of a newer, risk-taking generation, the behind-the-scenes reality was far less harmonious. From the outset, it was clear the two actors operated from radically different philosophies. Harrison Ford, a product of classical training and decades of steady, craftsmanlike discipline, treated each scene with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. His process was rooted in economy, professionalism, and respect for the structure of the filmmaking apparatus. In contrast, Shia LaBeouf arrived with the volatility of modern method sensibilities, an actor more concerned with emotional truth than technical polish, more instinct than intention. The clash was immediate. During the very first rehearsal, LaBeouf launched into a fully immersive, emotionally charged interpretation of his character, often improvising lines and behavior that veered far off the script. Ford, known for his no-nonsense demeanor and strict adherence to story and timing, bristled. According to stunt coordinator Vic Armstrong, the contrast was stark. Harrison treats every scene like precision engineering. Shia treated every moment like an emotional archaeological dig. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. LaBeouf, in his own chaotic way, was digging into himself, into the role, into the air around him, while Ford was building a temple that needed to stand. Matters worsened when LaBeouf's intense preparation began bleeding into the rest of the set. Cast and crew alike reported a growing sense of unease as LaBeouf's improvisations and erratic energy disrupted the careful cadence Ford had come to rely on. LaBeouf at times would remain in character between takes or request off-script emotional beats that threw off the scene's timing. Ford reportedly saw this not as bold artistic exploration but as avoidable interference. The conflict reached a boiling point during the filming of a key emotional sequence, an intimate father-son confrontation meant to underscore the emotional stakes of the story. LaBeouf, fueled by instinct, began layering in spontaneous dialogue and physical gestures not previously discussed. Ford, normally calm under pressure, broke protocol and called a halt to the scene mid-take, an act he almost never engaged in. Crew members described the ensuing silence as electric, with the air so thick with tension that even seasoned professionals stepped back. What followed was not an explosive argument but something more charged, a kind of cold dent. Ford reportedly pulled LaBeouf aside and delivered a candid critique about the nature of collaboration, discipline, and respect for the story's framework. Those on set referred to it afterward as a masterclass in professional restraint meeting youthful rebellion. In the film's post-production phase, Ford made his feelings about the dynamic abundantly clear. Speaking privately with producer Frank Marshall, he summed up the ordeal in a line that would later echo through industry circles. "There's a difference between commitment to character and commitment to chaos, and I won't enable the latter." It was a cutting, firm assessment, one that defined Ford's clear line in the sand. As production wore on, the distance between the two actors grew wider. LaBeouf, often left to rehearse with the assistant director, was largely isolated from Ford in the final weeks. When LaBeouf finally wrapped his scenes, members of the crew reportedly saw Ford exhale for the first time in days. One long-serving crew member put it simply, "He looked like someone who had survived a beautiful but exhausting storm." Kevin Costner. Among the many tantalizing Hollywood what-ifs, few are more discussed in industry circles than the derailed collaboration between Harrison Ford and Kevin Costner on what was once envisioned as a sweeping era-defining Western. The film was never made, the title never revealed to the public, but its implosion during pre-production has become the stuff of legend, a textbook case of how star power, when doubled, can collapse under the weight of its own gravity. Both Ford and Costner had reached career summits by the time the project entered development in the early 1990s. Ford, fresh off critical and commercial success with emotionally complex roles in films like The Fugitive and Presumed Innocent, was eager to find a Western that reflected his aging star persona, grizzled, introspective, morally burdened. Costner, having just cemented his reputation with Dances with Wolves, was determined to craft another mythic, visually lush epic celebrating the American West. The project initially appeared to be a dream match, two box office icons uniting for a genre they both revered. But that reverence quickly revealed itself as rivalry. Trouble began almost immediately during pre-production when it became clear that both actors intended to be the film's central figure, not just on screen, but in terms of creative vision. Each believed the film should be the defining Western of his career, a culmination of everything he brought to Hollywood stardom. That mutual ambition made compromise difficult and eventually impossible. The heart of the conflict lay in drastically different interpretations of what the story should be. Ford, always the minimalist and deeply committed to character psychology, envisioned a narrative that focused on the personal toll of frontier violence. He wanted a lean, morally ambiguous tale that showed how the myth of the West had left men emotionally crippled. His character notes and script suggestions often explored quiet moments of moral reckoning, stares into the fire, silences that spoke louder than gunshots, the weariness of survival. Costner, by contrast, sought grandeur. He saw the film as a visual elegy to the American frontier, sweeping landscapes, big battles, and thematic arcs that span decades. He wanted the story to breathe with the same mythic scale as Lonesome Dove or How the West Was Won. To him, the Western genre was about ideals and imagery, about manifest destiny painted on a cinematic canvas. Psychological subtlety, while not unwelcome, was never the main event. According to producer Lawrence Kasdan, who had previously worked with both men, Harrison wanted to explore the psychological cost of frontier violence on individuals. Kevin wanted to capture the mythic grandeur of American expansion. They were making completely different films while reading the same script. Meetings became battlefields. Each actor began lobbying the screenwriters for script changes that emphasized his own character's depth and reduced the other's narrative weight. Ford pushed for scenes that put the spotlight on moral ambiguity and inner conflict. Costner countered with set pieces that required retooling plot lines to elevate visual spectacle and grand historical themes. The rewrite cycle quickly spiraled out of control. Screenwriter William Goldman, brought in as a consultant late in the process, described the development room as a creative death spiral where each revision made collaboration more impossible. Every draft became a territorial maneuver. Every note was received as a threat. Goldman reportedly joked that the only way to finish the script would be to split it into two films and let them each star in their own. The final confrontation came in a now legendary development meeting, which those present describe as the most civil but devastating argument ever witnessed. Ford, frustrated by what he saw as superficiality in the latest draft, directly questioned the integrity of Costner's character motivation, suggesting that the story lacked emotional logic. Costner, cool but visibly irritated, responded with a line that became infamous in industry gossip: "Harrison, you're trying to turn an epic into a therapy session." That was the breaking point. The conversation ended. So did the film. Officially, the studio blamed creative differences, but behind the scenes, it was widely understood. The project had collapsed under the weight of two titans who refused to yield. Neither was willing to play second fiddle. Neither was willing to compromise on what he believed the Western should be. And in the end, that refusal ensured the movie never would be. What do you think about the 6 actors that Harrison Ford hates the most? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.